Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Renaissance Room podcast. And in today's episode, just very briefly, I'm coming on to talk about Beauty in Black. One, I am considering pivoting, not necessarily from the channel, but maybe creating another space for us to talk about lighter things. And I don't know what that looks like. And I don't want to say this matter of factly because I don't actually know what that pivot is going to look like. But right now, as you know from previous podcast episodes, your girl is just in a season where I need something lighter, right? Unfortunately, I am not really in a space where I'm able to get all of my studies done on top of just dealing with life and the weight that is currently on my shoulders. So I just want to give you guys an update in regards to that. But, disclaimer, if you don't want to listen to this podcast episode, I'm documenting this one here because I do think that this was such a great show, and I think that it deserves some level of recognition as it relates to culture. One, I absolutely love Black shows, right? And I think that there just got to a point in my life where I don't really know when it kind of shifted, but I got so tired of not really seeing any representation of us on television. And so it really started with me like watching movies on Tubi. And a lot of times it was reruns, right? So prior to that, I didn't really watch TV. I had a few shows that I did like, some more heartfelt shows like This Is Us. I really, really love that series. I think the writers did such an amazing job. I did like Albert Elementary, but again, not anything that I really followed through because again, this was more so like lighthearted content, right? Like lighthearted shows. Prior to that, I absolutely loved Insecure. I did not like her show. I think it was rap something that was stupid. I didn't like that, but I really, really loved Insecure. I was very knee deep into that. And so I think, with all the trailblazers, right, and where we are today, I love it, right? I loved Power. I felt like Power, that entire series with Ghost, that was just so good. Did not really care for Tommy's segment of the show. Didn't watch that. Didn't care for BMF. I felt like BMF was way too much. Did not like P-Valley at all. I just watched like barely an episode of that, and I was like, this is not for me. I did like Snowfall just a little bit, but I couldn't really get into it. Atlanta was full of like parables and like innuendos. Like I just couldn't really get into Atlanta. But I do felt like Atlanta had a lot of powerful messaging. So didn't really care for that. But I also think it was because I couldn't really get into Childish Gambino's work just because on a personal tip, I felt like he was wilding out like politically and he was just not standing on the right side of the fence. So I kind of just like backplayed from that. But I also felt like with Gambino, I never really cared for him or Tyler, the Creator. Just creatively, like there were a few songs that I used to like about, and when I say songs, I'm also talking about the work of Childish Gambino, right? And what is his name? Donald Glover. As me calling him Childish Gambling, my honey. But so I used to like his works, like a few songs, but I never really was crazy about him. So when Atlanta came out, I wasn't like entirely thrilled to jump on that. But I do feel like it's a good show. I hear a lot of people say a lot of good things about that one. And I'm trying to think what other shows. I can't think of any other shows at this time. But yeah, in between time, I've been watching like a lot of Bernie Mac and I've just been cracking up. So anyway, there has been like this huge shift that I noticed and I don't really know where it came from, but I just really found myself so interested mostly in Black shows, right? I think I just kind of got tired of being so, I just felt like I was just constantly being immersed in like cultures of other people and things like that I just did not want to be immersed in. I just wanted to see, more shows that were of Black people. And so watching Beauty in Black. Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. Lastly, I did watch Reasonable Doubt on Hulu. Really liked that show. I didn't really care for the storyline. I felt like the writers could have done a better job. It was a bit predictable. I felt like with all the suspense that they tried to create, it just became very repetitive, right? We knew what was going to happen next. Like Beauty in Black you could tell it has some amazing writers on it. Now, before I address some of the criticism that people have about Tyler Perry and the show and all these different things. One, I want to say that when it comes to successful persons, when it comes to celebrities, when it comes to all these people, as much as I am here for the criticism, right? And I'm here for, calling people out on their behavior and calling people out on the abuse or misuse or negligence rather of their influence on the African-American community. I think it does get to a point, y'all. It gets to a point where I think we have to address that there is a little bit of I don't want to, just for lack of better words, I told y'all where I was in my life right now. But, there might be a little jealousy there. And the reason why I say that, right, quote unquote, in defense of athletes, right, in defense of celebrities, although we know that they don't need any defending. Like, there's a lot of people who idolize them. We don't need to defend them. But I think when you start talking about charitable giving back to the community, things like that, I want to start off by saying, one thing that I realized with people who really are on that specific trajectory is that their lives are very narrow, right? It's tunnel vision until they hit a point of success. A lot of time that does require, in Tyler Perry case, he talks about his faith. Same thing with Steve Harvey. For some people, I think, depending on their journey, then when you become successful, you really don't have that much experience, right, within the Black community. I know we are like, everybody comes from the gutter, everybody knows everybody from the gutter. It's just not the case, And so when you're, successful and you're in that space, your environment changes significantly. And I don't think we really take that in consideration, right? We don't actually consider the fact that there gets to a point where you are so wealthy and you are super successful that your environment is completely different. And I think that these people are enjoying the fruits of their labor, right? And again, this is in defense of, I'll say in defense of athletes, right? And with that being said, I think with that comes a level of detachment from where you've been. And for people who have had personal struggles, right, which we all know, right, we all come from that to an extent, nobody wants to go back to that. And I do think that when you talk about Black excellence, right, and you couple that with influence and celebrities and athletes or whatever, those who are, wealthy within the Black community, I do think that they have a very high standard compared to their counterparts of a different race. Now, obviously, we know there's a myriad of reasons for that, and I'm not necessarily saying that they shouldn't, but I am also saying that I do think to some extent the scrutiny that they are held to is a little unfair sometimes. And I don't want to say it's merely due to jealousy, but I do think that there's sometimes a bit of imbalance when you talk about criticism. Now, a lot of people obviously had very, common things to say about Tyler Perry's Beauty in Black. Everyone's like, hey, listen, at the end of the day, there's these really harmful stereotypes about Black people. And I just wonder, at what point do we decide what entertainment is, is feasible? What point do we decide what if entertainment is enjoyable, right? Because it just kind of seems as though, especially today, we get to a point where everything that is put in front of African Americans is criticized. And the things that are really harming us on the forefront, on the ground level, we're silent about those, right? I think I gave the example prior in a video that I made where I was really disoriented, incredibly tired, but I kept pushing for y'all. So anyway, when I listen to the criticism about Beauty in Black and everyone's like, it's playing into the same harmful stereotypes, and it makes me question, again, you start talking about Black excellence, that you talk about standards, you talk about pleasure, you talk about enjoyment, and you talk about, under entertainment. What is it that we are to enjoy as African American people, right? What are we allotted to enjoy, right? Are we allowed to have joy? Are we allowed to have entertainment? Are we allowed to have pleasure, right? I think in the minds of many of us, right, we fail to reckon with the fact that every culture has the same dysfunctions, right? Whether it is covered up, whether it is, made more manageable, whether it's under the guise of just, greater economic resources, greater, familial fronts, right? There's more unity, whatever the case may be, those dysfunctions persist because it persists within the human race, right? And I'm not going to take away from all of that African Americans have went through, all that we have endured, all of the dysfunction that has been plagued in our community because of all of the systems and the things that we've had to overcome and we still are overcoming. But at the same time, I just don't quite really get the criticism in regard to this one. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't quite get it. I mean, people are saying the same thing they've always said about Tyler Perry, right? But when I think about, Beauty in Black, and you think about the show, you think about the writers, and I think if you look at it from a more of a fictional lens, right? I think it's a great show. And I don't know why, for us and for many of the critics who are criticizing the show, why are we looking at this like a nonfiction, right? Why are we looking at this like this is a we're looking at this like, oh my God, this is just, it's so stereotypical, but it's a fiction, right? It's playing into the imagination. Like, it's a good show. It's a great storyline. And everyone's like, well, we just don't have healthy depictions. And it's like, well, we do have healthy depictions, but those shows aren't doing as well, right? Because it's boring. People cut on the television and they want to essentially escape. They want to watch something exciting. They want to, you know what I mean? They want to watch something with a great storyline. It's about, being a good writer and a good storyteller. And I think Tyler Perry has done that very beautifully within this show, right? One, I really love how it prefaces on, Black hair care. I think that's so amazing. You know what I mean? We started talking about the perm and all these different things. I thought that was great. I love how it's a Black family, right? There is no, well, Norman had a white wife, but you know what I mean? There's this Black family. It centers on the Black family, right? It's no different than what the show that's also right now out. That's the Murdochs, right? I love that. I thought that was just such a beautiful overarching theme, right? Like Beauty in Black is like a perm box, right? It's a hair care. I think that is awesome. The other thing that I really love is I really love how we have Mallory, this very beautiful, classy, you know what I mean? Just depicted woman, very slender. Love that, right? I love how we have Kimmy, who, obviously has a completely different background, who comes from a very hard life, right? But she's then turned into this COO, right, of $1 billion company. And I just think it's just really great how they kind of play on these characters in contrast. I love how we kind of see the recklessness of Charles. I love how we see the arrogance of Roy, right? Like, I just love how these characters are really, I just love how they're kind of playing out. And I think for me, I'm just more so looking at it like from a writer's perspective. And I think it's really cool that they were able to kind of tie all this together. I think the other thing is that the show has so much momentum, right? You never really know what's coming next, right? And I love that. Like the scene with Charles and Varney, I did not see that coming. I would have never guessed, never imagined it, right? I love when Mallory is sitting at dinner with Varney and she's like, oh my God, I'm so glad, because I thought that there was something wrong with me. And I never think there's nothing wrong with me. You know what I mean? So it's like you see this just like very very confident, arrogant type of woman, right? I love Debbie. What is her name? Debbie Ryan. Debbie Ryan is definitely like a Disney star. It's not Debbie Ryan. What is her name, y'all? Y'all know, don't give me the line. Let me go back and see. What is her name? Let me see. Y'all, I'm sorry. I'll be drawing a blank. Debbie Morgan. Absolutely love Debbie Morgan in this one. Amazing actor, right? Just very amazing actor. She's done so much over her career. She's always in the Tyler Perry films, which I personally like, right? I'm sure it keeps her employed. And then I also think too, you think about Tyler Perry, you think about the back end. I know it's like, okay, he uses the same actors and so forth, but at the same time, when you think about these Black actors, they all come out, right? Taraji P has been very vocal about this, right? How she, has really struggled within the film industry. I'm not really sure what the disconnect was with her and Tyler Perry. I did not go down that rabbit hole. I think she has addressed some things, some injustices or some inequalities at Tyler Perry Studios. But overall, I mean, you really see Tyler Perry really keeping a lot of these actors employed, right? Like, and I just think that's awesome. I just think it's awesome. We don't know the contracts, but I'm sure the numbers are nice, and if they're not, hey, I don't want to get too, I'm not trying to politicize this, right? Like, I'm just sitting here talking about the show and just how I think the writers did a really, really great job at storytelling. And I think the visuals are amazing. Everybody looks absolutely amazing. I think that's one of the things I really loved about Power, right? 50 Cent series was just the fashion, right? The fashion of of everything. I love how, and the Beauty in the Black. I love Angel's character. I think Angel is just the perfect name for him. You know what I mean? Like, even just in the way in which he looks with him being Latin, I just think it's amazing. I absolutely love that. I love how we see, it kind of really shining a light on some of the realities of the Brazilian butt lift surgery. I know somebody was talking about that, like, oh, this is such a stereotype. And it's not. One of the things that I think that when you start talking about fiction and you start talking about its ability to pull and contrast and compare from reality is that fiction gets to tell a different story, whereas reality doesn't actually tell a different story, right? There are no heroes, right? There is no redemption story a lot of times in reality. And I think what you see within Beauty in Black, if you are to kind of look at it and you want to critique it from a more, this doesn't align with our stereotype, or this is stereotypical rather, and it doesn't align with our reality, is that it doesn't align with the reality in the fact that there's a lot of spin-off, right? And that's the beautiful thing about fiction is like you step into the world and it the scene changes, right? Things change. The outcome is not what you were expecting. Because in reality, it didn't go that way, right? And so I think that's great. I think another thing that I really love that the writers did was just really keeping all the actors, right? I'm absolutely loving how there's so much suspense, right? Obviously the show does have, murder, I'm not gonna say, can you say murder on here? I don't know. I love that the show has that, but I also love that not everybody's dying. You know what I mean? Not everybody's dying. People are being harmed. It's a lot of, it's suspenseful, right? There is violence in the show, but at the same time, they're keeping the storyline alive. And I love that. I love that it's not so predictable. Like with Glenn, for example, in the second season, it wasn't, this is what happened, right? Now we know Jules is going to X, Y, and Z. Now it's like, okay, Glenn has been harmed, right? What is Jules going to do now, right? It wasn't as bad as a death, but so I think it is amazing when you start talking about it from a storytelling perspective. I think it's a great show. I absolutely love how you have this Black family dynasty. I love shows like this, right? I think there was another show, Greenleaf. I didn't get to watch Greenleaf, but I do believe that also was kind of like some of the same. And I'm not sure if that was a Tyler Perry one. I think it might have been. But I thought the overall story plot was pretty cool too. When you start talking about, religion and church and things like that, and you kind of have this crookedness of the pastor. Again, I didn't watch the show, but I think that was pretty much the overarching thing of it. And so, anyway, I think that for me, when you think about imagery and I think about imagination and just like, again, the power of storytelling, I think the characters, everybody fits perfectly, right? You're sitting here at this, this board meeting and you have Kimmy, who is this, curvaceous, right, Black woman, and she knows her stuff, right? She's underestimated because she obviously has a different background, right? And then here you are sitting with Mallory, and Mallory is this, completely opposite, obviously, very classy, very stylish, woman, and it's like she fits the mode of being the X, Y, and Z, but you have Kimmy, right? And so I think one of the things that I just absolutely love, again, it's just how the writers have written this. I think this is beautiful. And I think sometimes when we critique film and we sit with, art and things like that, I don't think we always kind of look at it from what it really takes, right? I think a lot of people who are very critical of some of Tyler Perry's films, I don't think they really sit with the production of it. Like, I don't think people realize, like, okay, this is a script that has to be written. You know what I mean? I think in all of the Madea films, I think that Tyler Perry has always had a very beautiful way, personally, of ending the films, right? And really finding meaning and like it being a bit of a catalyst to healing. The film's kind of ending with a more wholesome, right? Even if there was some, very harmful things in there. I think one of the things that I will say, when you start talking about some of these dynamics at play, right? For example, we'll critique the athlete, we'll critique them, but we don't actually know what it's like to be on the inside. And I don't think that how can I put this? I think that sometimes when it comes to us critiquing art, especially in terms of its storytelling, I don't think that we like to kind of look at some of the dysfunction that is within our culture, which is within every culture, right? And I don't think we'd like to look at that. I think that we are so stern about being presented in a certain way. And although I understand that, like, obviously, but I think when you start talking about fiction, you're talking about television shows and series and things like that are just purely for entertainment, right? It's not intended to be harmful. I don't think I quite understand. I just think that we, I don't know why that's the one thing that, especially today, right, that people are so critical of and try to control. You know what I mean? Like I said, I think you've got very, other shows out there that are just as innocent, right? Abbott Elementary doing great things, right? But nobody's really talking about that. Nobody's watching that, right? Because it's not entertaining, right? It doesn't have any suspense or thriller. It's no mystery. It's just straight through and through. I don't think that anybody who is of another race could watch Beauty in Black and say, You see what I'm saying? This is what it is about Black people. I just don't think I don't think that's the plot. I don't think that that's what they're getting from that. And I think as much as we are very critical of Black film and Black storytellers, I don't think that we realize that we've come a long way from harmful and stereotypical depictions, right? And again, like I said, my overall thing is like, for the people who are saying that and their argument is like, this is stereotypical, there is dysfunction, there is, struggles for power throughout every, culture. You know what I mean? Like it's not a Black thing. And I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice by always seeking to defend and to identify with such stereotypes. You know what I mean? Instead of humanizing one another, humanizing Black people and saying, okay, again, just like in Beauty and Black, you have this family dynasty, there's corruption, there's all these different things. It's no different than the Murdochs, right? It's no the different shows that we see online. And I just don't think that we give ourselves that space to kind of just be human. Again, like I said, I think just on a lighter note, I think Tyler Perry Studios have more than likely employed a lot more African Americans than any other production company. And I'm sure it's kept a lot of people in business longer than any other production company, right? Like you look at, again, Debbie Morgan, I'm sure, she's well over, 50, and she's still doing great things. So I don't know, you guys. Like I said, I think that it's beautiful. I love the imagery of it. It's shot very beautifully. I love this amazing building. I'm loving, you know what I mean? I love it. I think it's such a great show. And again, I just think the writers did such an amazing job. And I think sometimes that we could kind of sit back and realize what is really going into this, right? Can we look at this from a critical standpoint and not necessarily just criticize it and say, wow, this is fiction, right? It's not real. Okay, it's not a documentary. And most importantly, are we like this with Spike Lee, right? Do we have the same energy for Spike Lee, or is it just because it's Spike Lee and it's not Tyler Perry? Like, I just think when you start talking about criticism, people get very critical of art. What are we talking about here? I know Spike Lee's most recent film didn't do so great. I think it was like High and Below. I think a lot of people were like, the way it was shot was definitely giving Spike Lee. I was listening to Wesley on New York Times. He was talking about the film. But overall, you guys, I don't know. I just think that we've come so far from, we've come so far from, Beast of a Nation, right? And I just think we're on the other side of some of this. And I'm not saying it's all good, but I am saying, where do we begin to draw the line between storytelling through fiction and real life representation through media depictions? And I think that there's a very big difference between those two. And so if you haven't watched Beauty in Black, you might want to check it out. I think it's great. Like I said, I really enjoy the overall storyline. Right? I think it's just so cool with it just prefacing on that perm box. I think, what you really see here is how money can sometimes be at play. I don't think it's a matter of, Black people being corrupted by money. I think that that's just what happens to people who have money, right? A certain amount of money. You seeing these power dynamics. And I think it's a great show. And I think that you will really find it through the lens of storytelling. Very intriguing. Like I said, it's one of those things to where you think something's going to happen and it doesn't, right? And I love how it's not too gore, it's not too horrific, right? There's violence within the show, but the main characters are pretty solid. And I think that's great. That's not something that you typically see, right? Typically you'll see, characters on the show who, could have a really good spinoff, being, So anyway, check it out. These are my thoughts. Peace.